Strange Destinations, the show where innovators share the tales of the accidents, the inspirations and the connections which led them to create their own unique paths. I'm your host, Dan O'Grady, co-founder of Simpatico, and this show is brought to you by Silicon Beach Radio. Now a quick word from our sponsors.
Silicon Beach Radio, proudly sponsored by Allied Legal, legal advisors to innovative businesses. MYOB, business software that sets you up for success. Victory Offices, flexible workspace solutions, premium serviced offices, co-working, lounge space, virtual office and meeting spaces.
Welcome to Strange Destinations. Our guest today is Garry Williams. Welcome, Garry.
Hi Dan, thank you for having me.
Garry is a multifaceted creature. Amongst many things, built himself as an advocate for non-traditional careers. And I think that's a really good jumping off point. If you'd like to share with everybody what that entails.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think further to that, I'm definitely essentially an advocate for, self-initiated projects, not necessarily a full business or business scope, but definitely seeing people, in that spirit of collaboration that's referenced within a community terminology, but seeing that people can come together or get ideas to eventuate where they can, develop things. And that could be anything from obviously an actual business or project that could be worked on, whether content-driven, product-based or more. And then further, obviously, some things that can provide some supplemental income to a full-time job, which is allowing, people to, on the side, dip into the, say, startup and tech and creative community a bit more. And then all the way to, people who just love running events and engaging with people heavily and bringing people together in a gathering context so that they can communicate the thing out that they're most passionate about. It could be a business to business, sort of a B2B exercise, or it could just be for the love of it. And I'm interested in constantly hearing those stories, which I'm sort of privileged to do in my everyday life. Yeah.
So how did you create what you're, you've created what you're advocating, which is quite a unique position to be in. How did that come about?
Yeah, I'm really I've been really fortunate actually. I've worked bloody hard, but definitely I had a very throughout my 20s. I'll look at, to be perfectly honest, probably completely wasted my potential in my 20s, but I was not necessarily that fazed by it because I was happy in the things I was interested in, which was just, enough money and just enjoying life. And for me, a large part of that would be the things that kept me busy on the weekends or throughout the week, mainly attending music gigs many times a week. Had lots of friends playing in bands. So bands and the music scene and other things that would emanate from that were always viewed as sort of a hobby, or, I collect a lot of music and was very interested. And then in my late 20s, I started a band with some friends, which was the story of my life, just long overdue. Should have done it far earlier, but did start it eventually and had an amazing time. So I guess referencing that, I was working in a corporate setting. I definitely didn't love it, but started to get a bit more serious towards the end of my 20s. And then I, for the purposes of branching out into a more senior leadership position when, it was time to get serious and, buy a house and fucking get married and have kids and buy a dog. At that time it was all around a more senior leadership positions, which was married directly to more income, to buy stuff.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was I went back to university for a master's degree. I viewed that education as crucial for me to qualify myself for that position because I felt like I'd already put in quite a bit of work and was not being taken for a ride, but was just not probably in an environment that was initiating a lot of promotion internally.
Right.
Went into the thing, smashed it out, sort of full time, while working in a very demanding full-time job as well. And what ended up happening was I had taken on this master's, which was a business and IT dual master's program, but I fundamentally took it because user experience was a part of it, and I was fascinated with it. Started to develop an emerging startup idea. Quickly became pretty sort of unhappy with the curriculum of the master's towards the second end of it.
And where was that interest in user experience coming from?
I was working in e-commerce and digital marketing at the time. I wanted to move into more of an innovation-focused role, and felt like I always had ideas, no matter how batshit crazy they would be at times. But I felt like every time something would get brought up from an internal or brand innovation perspective, that my ideas could be somewhat thought-provoking, or at the very least would strike up some conversation. So at the this is more in reflection. At the time, I just you're racked with if you're coming from sort of a low or middle tier capacity within a very large national organisation, feelings of inadequacy, or whether these are good ideas, or whether
anyone's going to listen.
Yeah, or whether whether you're on brand, or whether you're meant to play a certain role within there.
And is that what led you to look at your own startup and taking those ideas?
Yeah, I just spoke about this last night. I had a festering idea which was tied into my love of pop culture and music, etc., which was around some sort of a social media connection piece. So not a platform, but a socially connected hive of people who could come together for a shared love of collecting particular objects or things. So, and I started doing research, and this was all sort of tied into the educational program as well. But by that, I meant that when I started asking people about this, sort of collecting behaviour, I would inevitably find out from people that they did in fact have something that they would happily spend their money on, budget notwithstanding. So for some people it was vinyl records from a music perspective, or a particular band, or maybe it's limited edition artwork from a particular artist, or particular handbags or boots or whatever. But as I challenged people a little bit with the notion, I started to quickly find out that there was pretty much always something that people really felt emotionally attached to and would purchase.
Yeah. And for yourself, what's that thing?
I got this, it used to be band t-shirts a lot when I was attending gigs. And I just, it's a small story for that. But, a few years ago, apart from a couple of favorites, just got rid of all the band t-shirts. I'm in, startup world. I'm gonna get, go for simplicity, have my basic t-shirts, takes all the thought process out of it. And then inevitably I found, some really cool t-shirts that have some really cool sort of pop culture reference type stuff. So I'm a sucker for 80s influenced sort of pop culture stuff that would obviously remind me of my childhood. So 80s action movies, or cult sort of films, whether physical objects or posters, etc. It just always gets me a little bit, and I need to temper my collecting behavior. But vinyl records, definitely. So I'm a digital music consumer, but I still purchase records, even though my record player is busted.
Right.
And I haven't listened to a vinyl in over a year now, but I still collect them for that, that day when I've got 4 hours free in the house, and a couple of bottles of wine, and I'll just smash out my favourite records in peace. Yeah, because I've got 2 kids.
Right. I actually kind of got back into vinyl about a year ago. My brother moved interstate, and he had a couple thousand records, and he didn't really want to move them all. So he said, take whatever you want. And luckily we have very similar tastes. So I just grabbed, 300, which I knew would be like, yeah, this is a good collection. It's like, oh, and I happen to have a spare turntable. There you go. It's like, great, instant collection. So back into it. So
Yeah,
I know the pain.
yeah. Look, it's a concept that fascinates me. I think that whether, it didn't end up developing into a startup, but it got me focused on a startup mindset, or knowing the things that I would need to consider. So it never progressed to your sort of pitching, to the idea stage of pitching.
Right.
But it set me on that track for the investigation phase, because I was doing a lot of research on, well, then who are the companies around, particularly in Melbourne, who are the investors, what are the started to understand the notion of accelerator programs and incubators and more. And I didn't really know where it was sort of leading me, but I obviously found out soon enough.
Yes, it's the investigation phase is often more fruitful and confronting than the development stage.
That's right. Well, look, I mean, just to sort of close up that educational loop and then my actual leap into startup land, I was really dissatisfied with the masters by the end of it. Enjoyed the start, didn't enjoy it at the end. General Assembly had started in Melbourne and didn't exist at the time that I enrolled in that masters, but obviously it would have been a bit different if they'd launched by then.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't satisfied with, I guess, a level of things to pique my interest or understanding in the masters, I started self-investigating, and that entailed attending a lot of Startup Victoria pitch nights and Inspire 9, a lot of General Assembly events, and then also, really importantly, the company that I held at the highest regard in a startup and tech perspective, which was Envato, were running a lot of meeting and gatherings at that time. Not a lot, but there was quite a few that I went to over the course of a 3 to 6 month period, probably 4 or 5 times. So I immediately sort of started to feel at home in these environments, and that was a global progressive technology-based education location, a co-working environment with a ton of people, and an actual large-scale tech company based in Melbourne that was openly inviting someone like me in who didn't really know what they were there for or to do, but I was there.
It's interesting.
So really, I got to the end of my masters, and while writing my final thesis, I applied for a job at General Assembly for their head of partnerships role and ended up getting it. And I would hazard a guess it was more based on my knowledge of the creative industry. So my time in a band ended up really helping me out in the end. And this was partnerships and events and marketing. And I'd done all that on not much in a band sense in terms of budget, etc. So I knew how to scrap people together, and then started in the job, figured it out from there.
Yeah. And from there, obviously, you moved into different roles around partnerships and community.
Yeah, partnerships, community, innovation. These are all such vanilla, vague terms. They lose their relevance or ability to categorize efficiently. So, what does partnerships mean in reality? And the role, I guess, gave me license to, from a commercial perspective, General Assembly runs events, and a certain portion of the people that attend the free events transition along to understanding that if they pursue this, if they take on a full-time course, and the likelihood that they'll get hired after that with very current relevant skills in user experience or web development, etc., that they'll get hired by these leading companies in the industry. So there's a sales team in there that would help people transition into the course offerings with some qualification to work out their intentions, because it's a bloody hard course. But I got to have all the fun and run all the cool events and gather people together. So the role was great for me personally. It was basically licensed to meet with everyone in Melbourne and around, but really to understand the heartbeat of the city and what made it tick. And that really changed my life, to be honest.
Interesting, because fun enough, the first time, I don't know if we actually met, but the first time I ever came across you was almost 2 years ago. It was actually, you were hosting a FuckUp Night during Melbourne Knowledge Week 2 years ago. And I was going through that phase you were just describing, of that kind of investigation and going to events. And at that stage I was just, scoping out what I was doing. And that's the phase in which Simpatico was, I guess, gestating. I went to that particular event, and like you, community may be a vanilla term, but I turned up there and thought, holy crap.
Yeah.
There's 400 people here on a school night.
Yeah.
Because they want to.
I think it was pissing down rain too. And it's an event with fuck in the title, like it's nothing more absurd than that, really, is it?
Yeah. But it really kind of opened my eyes. I thought, there's a whole community, there's a whole sea of people here who are really looking, they're hungry to learn. They want more than just going home and watching Netflix or going to the pub or hanging out after work.
Yeah, that's right. We even, in a funny sense, and you'd appreciate this from an events perspective in the startup tech innovation space, whatever, within Melbourne. I would love to find some research or initiate this at some point in sort of drawing the parallels between Melbourne's sort of meetup event scene and Melbourne's live music scene, because they really, it's just very much a case of, throughout this great city, there's always a gig on at all parts of the city and the surrounding areas, and it's pretty much the same for from an events capacity in a meetup sense, a lot of which are free and easily accessible. And so for me, the concept of, lifelong learning is not just the relevance of the classroom, which is like real tangible skills for your work, but the ability that, if you set yourself on the path and you are curious enough, you can just consistently learn off people in a meetup sense through conversation or taking in conversations, or conversations just like this, where I learn more about you also. But I've had 2 meetings today where I've had a similar conversation as what we're having right now. Yeah. And I've learned a lot just from those 2 conversations about some things relevant to Melbourne's tech and government space, and on the other hand, around Sydney's tech and design creative space. And so for me, that's a whole bunch of crucial information that I packed into the first half of today that will probably come into effect sometime in the near future in some way. I've got knowledge newly armed at my disposal. So I love context and
everything else. And it also seems, you're a musician. I'm a musician. I was talking to Paul Barron on another episode. He's a drummer and a sculptor, it turns out. Really? Yeah. It's amazing how many people who kind of end up in this kind of startup innovation world also have a creative string to their bow, and it's not necessarily a kind of inverted commas, I'm a creative. They just have this impetus to make things, explore things, instigate things.
I was a singer in a band, so the bloody ego in me has meant that I've, never shied away from taking the microphone or like happily emceeing or running these things. But I genuinely love it to not only MC and do that stuff and initiate conversation with speakers after they've delivered a keynote or particular topics, but just to, with FuckUp Nights as an example, like, the ability to, the absurdity of an event that, Josh Lipscomb and I started in Melbourne around 3 years ago. We didn't really think it would last, and we didn't really know how it would work, and we had no money to run it, and it somehow is just lived on like a cockroach.
Yeah.
But it means something to certain people, and certain people take a lot away from it, and it might be the sense of place, or it might be the actual message delivered, or the speakers are given the ability to get something off their chest as well.
Possibly the essence of a good event. Every attendee is going to take something different from it. All you can do is try to put enough in the planning and making sure that the speakers and the way the event's set up allows the people who are there to draw something from it. You don't have any control over what they're going to take away from it, but it's just making sure that it's loaded with enough for people to be able to draw upon it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And well, that's right. I want people to take something away from it, whether it's just feeling something or some sense of connection, whether by the speakers or a chance encounter with someone they're maybe meeting on the evening, because it's a gathering fundamentally, and we like that subversive role that it plays in. I meet people and they might ask about what events I run, and I say it and I tell them I run something called FuckUp Nights, and I almost get a sadistic enjoyment out of the raised eyebrow and the again that they put back to me. But it's provocative, but when they understand a bit more about the themes that come up and issues of whether it's mental health or connection or connection to family or truly important things in their lives, then it's speaks with a little more human resonance, I think, and is why so many people return month after month. Even though a free event, it's still difficult to anticipate that people would return every month.
Well, I think when people are being open about failures, frailties, and just things that have gone sometimes horrendously wrong, it can be very, very eye-opening, but also, like you're saying, people will just take those things away, which are either sometimes quite intangible, but it can really let people know that, I'm not the only one who's been through something.
That's right. That's right. And whether it's a connection with the actual person that's speaking or just some sort of a North Star to reference in their own lives about the time they heard something that was sort of aligned, so that they know that someone's, experienced some hardship or setback or difficulty, whether in a startup business or personal context. I think that's relevant, as I've found relevance in, knowing my place within an environment that's welcoming, even though I don't have that startup attached to my credit, at the time, if that makes sense. So,
that's I guess part of, like I said, you've created a non-traditional career for yourself, and by being part of that world without necessarily, that startup world without necessarily being a startup guy yourself. I think that's a really good example of doing that, but also having a big impact through that.
Yeah, and that's right. I do have a startup which is sitting in the background that I'll have launched out soon enough. I play that role not of your traditional startup founder, even though I have an emerging one which I'm pretty excited about, but I definitely play that connector role within the city, as quite a few other people do, and it's a heavily important role amongst an environment. And also for my role, which is very focused on not just leading tech to be I want to see a large creative and cultural influence overlapping with the tech sector, and I think there's a real strength to doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's some distinction. I think it's a very Melbourne thing, if I had to speculate, as opposed to
other cities to the north.
yeah. And I love Sydney, but they definitely have their strengths, and Melbourne is a broader and creative and infused environment. So why would the tech and innovation space not have that as an omnipotent presence? But we still are in the process of we categorize startup and tech on one side, and we categorize the creative industry on the other. And I want to drive a large connection between the two.
Yeah, likewise. I know that feeling well. Well, look, Garry, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and I'm sure everyone's got a lot out of this. You've definitely covered a lot of ground. So thank you so much for your time. And,
thank you for having me.
Yeah. And if anyone out there wants to follow you, get in touch with you, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram as at G Williams ALTS or alts. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and yeah, to be honest, I'm pretty open. So,
Okay.
you know, I run quite a few events and sort of always around the traps.
Yeah.
You know, I regularly get people pinging me over LinkedIn, etc., just asking who's doing what, and I'd sort of invite people to do the same.
Great. Well, I'll put your LinkedIn and Instagram handles in the show notes, and feel free to look Garry up.
And Dan, I'm sure I'll see you at an event like next week or something.
More than likely, Garry. Great. Well, thanks everyone for listening to this week's Strange Destinations. It's been brought to you by Silicon Beach Radio and Simpatico. Cheers, everybody.